The day the universe learned fear. Ambassador Zilm had always believed that war was a matter of superior technology. The species with the best weapons, the most advanced ships, and the strongest shields would always win. That belief was unshakable until the humans arrived. The Galactic Accord had been at peace for nearly 5 centuries. Empires rose and fell, but diplomacy had become the true force of power. The days of primitive conquests and senseless battles were gone, replaced by trade agreements and strategic alliances. Violence was inefficient. But then, the humans changed everything. The first encounter was a disaster. The Morvani Dominion, one of the most dominant species in the galaxy, had dismissed the newly discovered human race as insignificant. They saw Earth as a primitive rock filled with barely spacefaring creatures. When the Morvani raiding fleets descended upon the Sol system, they expected a swift conquest. It was supposed to be easy. The Morvani had fleets armed with dark matter cannons capable of tearing apart dreadnoughts in a single shot. Their plasma shields could withstand the force of a supernova. Their soldiers were clad in exosuits impervious to traditional kinetic weaponry. Humanity. Humanity still relied on ballistic weapons, fusion drives, and ships that required fuel. Their fighters lacked inertia dampeners. Their command structures depended on centralized decision-making instead of AI-driven algorithms. The Morvani fleet entered Earth's orbit with a simple ultimatum: surrender or be eradicated. They never expected a reply. They certainly never expected laughter. The message that came through the universal translation system was simple. "All right then, hold my beer." The Morvani admiral dismissed it as an error in translation. Some human colloquial nonsense. It didn't matter. The bombardment began, and their warships rained fire down upon Earth's major cities. Then things went wrong. Humanity didn't fight with honor. They didn't fight like any other species the Morvani had ever encountered. They fought like demons. Within hours, the Morvani fleet realized their mistake. Earth wasn't just fighting back. Earth was adapting. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose. They didn't have energy weapons, so they turned their orbital debris into high-speed kinetic missiles, launching thousands of tons of scrap metal at near-relativistic speeds. The Morvani shields, designed to withstand energy-based attacks, were shredded by hypervelocity tungsten rods. They didn't have stealth technology, so they invented it overnight. Within the first 48 hours, human engineers had repurposed their outdated satellites into electronic warfare drones, jamming Morvani targeting systems, scrambling communications, and making their ships disappear from sensors. They didn't have quantum computing, so they stole it. Human hackers infiltrated the Morvani's fleet networks through a captured ship, overriding command protocols, turning their own automated defenses against them. Entire squadrons of Morvani battleships suddenly found themselves locked out of their own controls, drifting helplessly as human missiles tore through their hulls. The Morvani had expected a swift surrender. Instead, they got chaos. And humans thrived in chaos. The first Morvani fleet was annihilated within 3 days. The second fleet, sent as reinforcements, lasted a week. By the time the third fleet arrived, Earth had already upgraded, adapting alien technology, reverse engineering their enemies' weapons, and building ships faster than any galactic civilization had ever seen. The worst part? The humans were having fun. The last transmission. Ambassador Zilm stared at the holographic recording, his appendages quivering as he played the last known transmission from the Morvani admiral. The once proud warrior, leader of an empire that had crushed hundreds of civilizations, was weeping. His armor was shattered, his command bridge engulfed in flames, his mandibles clicked in frantic desperation. "You don't understand," the Morvani leader gasped. "They don't follow the rules. They don't fight like we do. They have strategies they don't even use because they think it's too mean." The recording flickered, and the human response came through. A grinning face, battle-scared and wild-eyed, leaning casually into the screen. You should have just asked nicely." Then the screen cut to static. Ziln felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The Morvani Dominion, a galactic superpower that had ruled for over 1,000 years, had ceased to exist in under a month. Their homeworld was still there. Their people still lived. But they had surrendered unconditionally. The terms of surrender were simple. Never attack humanity again. The truth about humans. As Ziln watched the report, he knew the truth. The galaxy had always assumed that war was about power, resources, and technology. They had never considered the one thing humanity had in excess: imagination. Humans had spent centuries imagining every possible way they could be attacked. They had thousands of fictional scenarios on how to survive intergalactic war. They had backup plans for their backup plans. And worst of all, they held back. They had weapons they refused to use because they considered them too much. They had plans that were too unethical, even for war. Humanity didn't fight wars to conquer. They'd fought wars to win. And then they went home. Ziln's choice. The ambassador exhaled deeply, trying to steady his nerves. He had been sent to propose an alliance. Not out of friendship. Not out of diplomacy. Out of survival. As he prepared his speech, the words of the last surviving Morvani officer echoed in his mind. If a human ever tells you, "Hold my beer," evacuate immediately. Ziln had no intention of ever finding out why. The day diplomacy became survival. Ambassador Ziln had met warlords, emperors, and self-proclaimed gods. He had faced beings who could incinerate planets with a thought, species that had evolved for war from the moment they slithered out of primordial ooze. But never, in all his cycles of service, had he been so terrified of a species that did not want war, because humans did not fear it. He sat in the High Council chamber aboard the Galactic Accord's flagship, his sensory appendages twitching involuntarily. Representatives from the most powerful empires in the known universe had gathered, and they all wore the same expression: dread. The broken empire speaks. The Morvani delegation was unrecognizable. Once draped in the golden robes of conquerors, now they sat hunched, their posture small, their exoskeletal armor dulled with defeat. Their high speaker, a being who once declared that his species was destined to rule the stars, could not even lift his head. The chamber fell silent as he spoke. We were wrong. 3 words. Just 3. And yet they carried more weight than any declaration of war. Humanity is not a species that should be provoked. They are not a species that can be subdued. And they are not a species that should have been underestimated. Ziln studied the reactions around the room. The Vakari, an amphibious race known for their ruthless naval strategies, had gone completely still. The Zoltar, a hive-mind intelligence spanning entire planetary networks, flickered in agitation. Even the Talari, a race who prided themselves on their impenetrable armadas, were visibly disturbed. The Morvani leader exhaled shakily. They fought us with everything they had, but it was not their weapons that defeated us. It was their insanity. They did things that no logical mind would have considered. The impossible battle. The Morvani had learned too late that humans did not think like other species. When their fleet blockaded Earth's moon, assuming that cutting off supply lines would force a surrender, humanity blew up their own supply depots, then repurposed the floating debris as high-speed kinetic projectiles. When the Morvani attempted a ground invasion, they discovered that human civilians, not soldiers, civilians, had turned entire cities into booby traps. Sewer systems flooded with industrial acid. Skyscrapers collapsed in controlled demolitions, taking enemy squads down with them. Children carried explosives in toy drones, flying them straight into armored patrols. The Morvani soldiers, hardened veterans who had conquered dozens of worlds, had begged for retreat within days. And the most horrifying part, humans weren't even fighting to win the war. They were fighting to make sure the Morvani never tried again. The fear that united the galaxy. For centuries, the Galactic Accord had been fractured, split between rival factions, old grudges, and territorial disputes. Entire generations had been lost to power struggles between the great empires. Now, for the first time in history, every representative in that chamber had the same enemy. Not humanity itself, but the idea of fighting them. Ziln finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do?" Silence. No one wanted to be the first to say it. Finally, the Zaltar Hive, the oldest and most calculated mind in the Accord, spoke in its eerie, multi-voiced harmony. "We must appease them." The chamber erupted into furious debate. Appeasement. They are primitives. Primitives who dismantled an empire in a matter of weeks. We must contain them before they spread. Contain them? The Morveni tried that. Their fleet is now drifting in Saturn's rings. Ziln watched as panic spread. Even the most warlike species present were forced to acknowledge the reality. If war with humanity was not an option, then survival depended on making them allies. The proposal that changed everything. It was Ziln himself who put forth the radical idea. "We have spent centuries forming alliances with one another. What if we offered the same to the humans?" The room fell into stunned silence. "You're suggesting we give them a seat in the Accord?" "A seat? No. I am suggesting we make them a protectorate." Gasps rippled through the chamber. It was an unprecedented proposal. The Accord had never feared a species before. They had certainly never submitted to one. They are unpredictable, dangerous, unruly, but they do not seek conquest, Ziln continued. If we show them respect, if we recognize their strength, perhaps they will see us as allies rather than threats. It was a desperate gamble, but the alternative was worse. The human response. The proposal was sent to Earth's governing bodies. For weeks, there was no reply. The silence was unbearable. Empires held their breath, waiting to see if humanity would reject the offer, if they would demand tribute, if they would retaliate for the attempted invasion. Then, one day, a single message arrived. A human diplomat appeared on the Accord's communication channel, looking almost amused. "So let me get this straight. You guys want us on your council because you're afraid of us." No one spoke. The human chuckled. "Well, that's a first." Ziln could feel the tension in the room. "All right, we'll play nice. But on one condition." Everyone leaned forward. The human smirked. "We want a seat at the table, and we want pizza on the official menu at all diplomatic events." Silence. Ziln didn't know what pizza was, but he knew one thing. The galaxy had just changed forever. The Galactic Accord meets their new overlords, sort of. Ambassador Ziln had never seen a High Council meeting so silent. Not even when the Morveni Dominion collapsed. Not even when the galactic economy teetered on the edge of ruin. But today, every species in the Galactic Accord was too stunned to speak. The humans had accepted their offer. They had not demanded reparations. They had not sought vengeance. They had laughed. Ziln could still hear the words of the human diplomat echoing in his mind. "All right, we'll play nice. But on one condition, put pizza on the official menu." The galactic community, an interstellar civilization spanning thousands of years, had just negotiated peace over a food item. Ziln wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. The arrival of the humans. When the human delegation finally arrived at the Galactic Accord's grand station, things did not go as expected. The Zaltar Hive, who had studied humanity extensively, expected a regimented military presence. The Vakari, warlike and disciplined, expected a formal entourage. The Talari, ever obsessed with hierarchy, expected a procession fitting of a species that had just single-handedly changed the balance of power in the galaxy. What they got was something else entirely. The first human to step off the diplomatic shuttle was wearing sunglasses, inside a space station. Ziln had studied humans long enough to know that sunglasses were meant to block excessive light. There was no excessive light here. The council chambers were optimized for multiple species comfort, and yet this human strode forward, chewing gum, wearing sunglasses, and dressed in an uncomfortably casual outfit that was most definitely not standard diplomatic attire. Behind him, the rest of the human delegation disembarked. Some wore formal suits, others dressed in what could only be described as business casual, and one was wearing a shirt with a cartoon dinosaur on it. Ziln felt his sensory appendages twitch in distress. The Morvani delegation, still recovering from their absolute annihilation, simply averted their gaze in horror. The Zaltar Hive's luminescent minds flickered with rapid-fire questions. Were the humans mocking them? Was this some kind of psychological warfare? Then the lead human, the one with sunglasses, spoke. "Yo, what's up, nerds?" Ziln had seen wars start over less. The Talari ambassador nearly fainted on the spot. The Vakari warlord hissed in offense. The Zaltar Hive had a full mental breakdown trying to decipher whether this was an insult, a greeting, or both. Ziln, who had spent months studying humanity's strange and often terrifying methods of interaction, intervened immediately before someone ordered a preemptive orbital bombardment. "Honored representatives," he said carefully, stepping forward, "we welcome the delegation from Earth. Please, allow me to introduce." "Nah, no need for all that. Just call me Jack," the human said, flashing what humans called a grin. Ziln stiffened. A grin meant one of two things with humans: amusement or impending chaos. "You're the lead diplomat?" Ziln asked, hesitantly. Jack snorted. "Me? Hell no. I'm just here to make sure we don't accidentally cause an intergalactic incident. The real ambassador is back on the ship." Before anyone could react, a second human strolled out of the shuttle. This one was different. She was calm, dressed professionally. Her posture was controlled, and her expression was unreadable. Ziln instantly knew she was the true threat. This was an actual diplomat. "Greetings," she said smoothly, nodding respectfully. "I am Ambassador Elaine Carter of the United Earth Coalition. On behalf of humanity, I am honored to accept this invitation." Ziln let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The rest of the Galactic Accord, still trying to process the absolute horror of Jack's existence, visibly relaxed. But not too much. Human negotiation tactics, or lack thereof. The Galactic Accord prided itself on structured diplomacy. Every discussion was meticulously planned, with years of preparation for even minor policy changes. Humanity, it seemed, had different ideas. "First order of business," Ambassador Carter said, folding her hands on the table. "We'd like a list of all restricted technologies." Silence. The Zaltar Hive visibly glitched. The Vakari warlord growled. The Talari ambassador's facial crest flushed an alarmed shade of red. Ziln hesitated. "That is not how these meetings work," he said carefully. "Technology restrictions are highly classified. Access is granted only after decades of trust building and—" "Yeah, we figured," Carter said casually. "That's why we're asking nicely first." The Zaltar Hive immediately initiated a silent mental debate on whether humanity was threatening them. The Vakari warlord slammed a fist on the table. "You expect us to hand over our most guarded secrets?" "Hand over?" No, Carter said, waving her hand dismissively. "We'll just, take a peek." Ziln felt his sensory appendages curl in absolute horror. "That is highly improper." Carter just smiled. "You misunderstand. We're just trying to avoid a situation where we figure it out on our own and do it better." Every species in the room had the same realization at the same time. Humanity had been held back by their own technology limitations. They had just reverse-engineered Morvani warships in weeks. And now, they were offering to learn through diplomacy before they inevitably figured it out themselves. It wasn't a demand. It was a warning. The Zaltar Hive, for the first time in history, spoke without its usual grace. "What technologies are you specifically interested in?" "Oh, just the fun ones," Jack chimed in from the corner. "The ones you guys think are too dangerous to use." "Excuse me? You know, the cool ones. The ones that are a little too destructive. The Morvani delegation visibly recoiled. Zilm barely held himself together. Surely, you jest. Jack grinned. Oh, buddy. We haven't even gotten started. The moment the galaxy realized it was too late, Ambassador Zilm had spent his entire career negotiating fragile treaties, balancing power struggles between empires, and carefully navigating the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy. Nothing in his training had prepared him for negotiating with humans. He had expected them to be reckless, arrogant, or overly aggressive. He had not expected them to be so casual about breaking reality. Let's talk superweapons. The High Council chamber, a place where the most powerful leaders in the galaxy convened, was utterly silent. Ambassador Carter, humanity's representative, sat calmly at the negotiation table, a neutral expression on her face. Beside her, the human known as Jack was slouched in his seat, chewing on what he called bubble gum, like he had zero respect for the galaxy's greatest rulers. So, Carter began, steepling her fingers. Let's talk superweapons. The Morvani representative, still emotionally scared from losing an empire in a matter of weeks, nearly fainted. The Talari ambassador, a species known for their strict codes of warfare, immediately protested. Superweapons are outlawed by the Galactic Accord. Oh, we know, Carter replied smoothly, which is why we'd like to discuss modifications. The Zaltar hive mind flickered with confusion. Modifications. Jack grinned. Yeah, see, we've been looking at some of your, forbidden tech, and we think we can make it better. Zilm felt his soul leave his body. Better. Oh yeah, Jack continued, his grin widening. Like that quantum disruption cannon. Yeah, we figured out why it overloads. Y'all were using a frequency modulation that destabilized after repeated firings. Easy fix. That weapon is outlawed for a reason. The Vakari warlord slammed his fist against the table. It tears holes in space-time. Yeah, that's the fun part, Jack said, completely unfazed. Zilm stared in horror. You fixed it. Yup. In how much time? Jack exchanged glances with Carter before shrugging. A week. Week and a half. The entire council flinched. The Morvani representative made a strangled noise. It took us 600 years to develop that weapon, and we abandoned it because it was too unstable. Well, yeah, because y'all overcomplicated it, Jack said, stretching lazily. It was a design flaw. Any engineer worth their salt could fix it. The universe had just learned something horrifying. The humans were already ahead of them, and they had gotten there by accident. The truth they didn't want to admit. The Galactic Accord had always assumed that their most dangerous technologies were safe from human hands. They had centuries of regulations in place. Strict laws. Experimental weapons were locked away in deep space vaults, never to be touched again. And yet, somehow, in less than a decade of interstellar contact, the humans had found those blueprints, studied them, and improved them. This is unacceptable. The Talari ambassador snapped. There must be restrictions on what humanity is allowed to access. Carter leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. You misunderstand, she said. We're not asking for access. We're telling you that we already figured it out. Zilm physically cringed. The Zaltar hive's luminescent forms flickered violently in distress. Then, what is your intent? They asked cautiously. Jack leaned forward, his sunglasses reflecting the light of the chamber. Oh, we just want to make sure nobody does something stupid, he said. Like, say, try to mess with us again. The Morvani delegation visibly shrank in their seats. The humans weren't asking for permission. Zilm could see it now, the way the galaxy had miscalculated. Humanity wasn't requesting technology. They were studying it on their own. They weren't asking to be included in discussions. They were forcing the Accord to acknowledge them. And worst of all, they weren't even trying to dominate anyone. They weren't demanding territory. They weren't overthrowing governments. They weren't expanding their borders. They were just fixing things, and no one could stop them. A terrifying revelation. What do you plan to do with this knowledge? The Vakari warlord growled. Carter smiled. That depends on you. The tension in the room skyrocketed. You see, Carter continued, we have no interest in war. But if someone, I don't know, decides they want to start another fight with us. She leaned back. Well, let's just say it won't be pretty. Jack grinned. We got bored and ran some simulations. Turns out, if we ever went to full war mode, it'd take about, a month to wipe out most of your fleets. The entire council froze. You're bluffing, the Tulare ambassador whispered. Jack pulled out a small holopad and casually tossed it onto the table. See for yourself. The Zaltar hive cautiously interfaced with the human device. They lasted 4 seconds before disconnecting in absolute horror. That is not possible, they whispered. That should not be possible. Oh, it's very possible, Jack said cheerfully. We just don't like doing it. War's a pain in the ass. Too much paperwork. Ziln felt ill. The humans weren't threatening them. They weren't boasting. They were stating facts. The deal that saved the galaxy. The silence stretched for too long. Finally, Carter stood. We're not your enemies, she said firmly. And we don't want to be. But if you ever try to pull another Morveni stunt, we won't hold back. Jack chuckled. We were really holding back last time, by the way. I mean, we didn't even use the really nasty stuff. Ziln did not want to know what the really nasty stuff was. So, Carter continued, her expression once again calm and diplomatic. Are we in agreement? The Galactic Accord had no choice. Every species in the room knew the truth now. If they fought humanity, they would lose. And humanity wouldn't even break a sweat doing it. The Tulare ambassador swallowed his pride. We accept. Excellent, Carter said, offering a handshake. The Tulare ambassador hesitated before reluctantly extending his hand. And just like that, it was done. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply won it, without firing a single shot.